As I'm sure you know, this was a significant event. There were 264 units ready to be occupied, over 286,000 square feet, which was totally destroyed. The owner of the developer owner was Lincoln Cooper Street LLC. The contractor was Callahan Construction. We had mutual aid through Metro Boston of 19 cities and towns, plus other entities, the MBTA, Sparks Association, they all helped out. There were 4 minor firefighter injuries. We were there between extinguishment and investigation approximately 6 days. The site has now been turned back over to the developer. This was as I said, a significant event, a large-scale investigation, which all these agencies worked on together and continue to work on. And we're here today to take any questions you might have. But before that, I'm going to turn it over to the marshal, and he wants to say a few words.
Thank you, Chief. As Chief Ciccone mentioned, early on the morning of July 23rd, we initiated an investigation, a collaborative investigation at the request of the Waltham Police and Fire Departments. In this case, the investigators have determined that the fire was intentionally set. We now move from the origin and cause investigation, or that phase of this investigation, into the criminal aspects of this investigation. We are asking for continued assistance from the public. We need the public's help to solve this case. If anyone has information as to who may have started this fire, they're asked to call the Arson Hotline at 1-800-682-9229. That number, 1-800-682-9229, is available any time of the day or night, and all calls are confidential. The Chief mentioned that we have the support of the Arson Watch Reward Program. The Arson Hotline is part of that program, sponsored by the Property and Casualty Insurance Companies of Massachusetts. The program provides rewards up to $5,000 for information that helps solve this case. An additional reward is being offered by the property owner and their general contractor, Callahan Construction Managers, of up to $100,000 upon the arrest and conviction of those responsible for setting this fire. Throughout this investigation, throughout this process, and as the Chief mentioned, throughout this incident, we've had tremendous support, and the City of Waltham has had tremendous support from a variety of sources, and the investigation is no exception. The team concept of investigation is supported by these local chiefs. It allows investigators to expand the team of trained investigators based on the case. In this case, the investigative team included Waltham Fire Department, Waltham Police Department, State Police assigned to the Office of the State Fire Marshal, and the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Throughout this investigation, and I'm sure the Chief would say on behalf of the city, throughout this incident, we've also had the critical support from many city and state agencies, especially all of the city agencies and the state police, the various sections of the state police that have supported this investigative effort as well. This investigation process is guided by standard protocols and concepts using NFPA 921 as a guide. We go through a significant process regardless of the site type and size of incident, and that certainly is the case here as well. An extensive scene examination, as the Chief mentioned. This investigation on site was over 6 days, and throughout the process, a number of Interviews, collection of information, and an extensive amount of scene work was performed to arrive at this point. Throughout that process, we've interviewed witnesses, firefighters, and people familiar with the building. Throughout the process, we've systematically eliminated all possible causes and led us to this point. The goal is to eliminate all possible ignition scenarios until left with one most probable cause whenever possible, and that's brought us to this announcement today. I'd now like to introduce Chief McPherson from the Waltham Police Department. Chief?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the other agencies that assisted us. We had to evacuate several multi-story buildings that were adjacent to the fire scene, and we couldn't have done it successfully without the help of several other police agencies, both local departments and the Massachusetts State Police. I also want to thank all the members of the State Fire Marshal's Office and the Waltham Fire Department who are working cooperatively with us on this investigation. You know, an arson fire of any magnitude really causes a great deal of concern in any community, but certainly a fire of this size, an arson fire, generates a lot more concern. Up till now, we've had a lot of cooperation and assistance from the members of the community, providing photos and videos and other information, and I want to say that's been most helpful. But we encourage anyone who may have any information to come forward, because we really need the public's help on this. And the best way to solve an arson fire is with the cooperation of the community, and it's the best way for the community to come forward under these circumstances. So once again, I'd like to thank everyone, and I would like to ask the public for their cooperation. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, does anybody have any questions of anybody? Yes, sir.
Chris Wagner, Waltham Channel. Did state
Hi,
police
Chris.
ever investigate during this investigation?
Yes. Excuse me. Not at this time. You know, any questions, I think I'll turn over to Lieutenant Zipper regarding the investigation. Lieutenant, if you'd like to answer those.
I didn't hear that question, ma'am. What caused it? Yeah, we'd like to keep that in-house. Eventually, we'd like to use that information on prosecution. So just understand we have a set fire, and as far as the particulars, we're gonna keep those in-house until such time as we need to release that information.
This is still a very active investigation, and therefore we're still developing information, and we're collecting evidence and so forth. So it is important to just hold some of that information, as it is still an active investigation.
Anything you could tell us as to what will lead investigators to believe that it is arson?
At this point, it's still an active investigation. We're not going to give out any additional investigative details.
What role did the construction play in how fast this fire spread? Do we have that?
Wood construction burns faster than non-combustible construction. This was a project that was near completion, so the normal fire suppression systems were not in play, although they were in place. You know, I think today what we want to do, we don't want to get into a referendum on wood frame construction. We're here to talk about the investigation, here to appeal to the public. So I think that'll answer your question. Thank you.
This is still an active investigation. We're taking the leads where they come from, and we're following them to the finality of the investigation. So right now, we're going to hold on to any additional details relative to the investigation and where it's going.
One in Dorchester recently. Are you thinking in terms of any zoning code changes? Is that something that you want to look at?
Well, zoning code changes would really be a local issue, but construction codes, we're in direct communication with the Department of the Office of Public Safety Inspections. within the Division of Professional Licensure where the building code resides, and we're in communication with the Board of Fire Prevention Regulations where the fire code is promulgated. Right now we have a working group, we have discussions ongoing, but I will say that in the fire code and in the building code there are some requirements for fire safeguarding construction practices, and those are in existence and for the most part are being followed across the Commonwealth, and therefore we're looking at how those standards and those requirements apply, and whether there's anything indicated through our experience and through experience across the country about fires during construction.
If this was intentionally said, there are fire codes that can require stronger security on construction sites, right? Is that something that is part of the discussion about increasing security requirements?
All aspects of safeguarding construction and safeguarding practices during construction are in discussion at this point. We use a guide document, the NFPA Standard 241, which provides a lot of direction. But again, each project is unique, and therefore we would have to take the site factors into consideration. The local head of the fire department and the local fire prevention people would take into account a variety of factors during those projects. But as the chief said, we're really here today to discuss the investigative process, the investigation, and our current status.
Did we ever have an estimate of the damage monetarily?
I believe it was in the $110 million range. Last figure I heard.
And do we know anything about insurance companies?
I do not.
Are you able to get any surveillance footage or video footage of the system?
This is still an active investigation, and we're not going to release any investigative aspects at this point. We're not going to release any investigative aspects at this point.
Do you have any estimate typically how long an investigation like this might hope to close it?
The investigation will really be, the timeline will really be driven by the information that we can gather. And again, as we've mentioned, we're appealing to the public. Anybody who may have information that would assist us in this investigation is asked to contact the Arson Reward Hotline.
How much would you say that the photos that you've gotten from people already has helped with the investigation thus far?
Information that we get from the public during these investigations is always helpful. And so anybody who may have information that has not been put forward to the investigators is encouraged to do so.
What's the role of the ATF in the investigation? If you could explain that.
Good afternoon. The ATF works on a team concept for arsons, and in this case, we offer all of our federal resources, our forensic chemists, auditors, cause and origin examiners, certified fire investigators, and complete cadre of arson investigators, make them available to our state and local partners. So again, we operate in a team concept and just offer support where we can.
How many people have been involved in investigating the fire? Do we have a total number?
I don't have the total number, but I can, I'd echo and strengthen that statement that the team concept is vital to our process. We all have areas of strength and areas that we can benefit from each other's resources, and we've had the complete cooperation of all the agencies that were highlighted, and all the agencies that have come to bear on this incident have been extremely helpful and collaborative in this effort.
Dozens of people?
Yes.
Did a 2015 arson fire that Department of Fire Services alerted Waltham residents to several years ago figure in the investigation into this arson fire? It was approximately a block away at the Jake's Dixie Roadhouse off Moody Street.
We're not releasing any aspects of the investigative information that's been developed at this point.
And this is for the fire chief. Can you say, how dangerous this was for your firefighters out there battling this blaze, and how much you want to stress what they were up against during those moments?
It was, and that's a good point. One of the early injuries we had was just from someone in one of our fire trucks pulling up to the scene and getting burned by the radiant heat. So this was very dangerous. It was a long battle. It was dangerous to everybody on the fire ground. When all the people in back of me here sign up for this, we'll accept the risks that are inherent in the profession. But when someone commits a criminal act I think it angers everybody because these are risks that we should not have to endure. And not only the firefighters, but the elderly living in the vicinity. A lot of them are infirmed. Just moving them from their domicile to them is can be a life-threatening issue. And they had to be evacuated. So there's a ripple effect here that was caused by a crime, and we should not have to endure that.
Have you ever had an evacuation that was as big as that?
Not in recent memory.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about the difficulties or how you assessed when you came on scene with that?
Well, the difficulties, as I said, were the fact that a lot of the people evacuated were infirm, were elderly. It's not as simple as getting them out of the building. You have to find a comfortable place for them to go, which we were fortunate. The mayor stepped in and worked on that. A lot of them are medication dependent. So now it's not just a point of getting them out, but you have to keep them on their medication. So it's a long process. We were very fortunate. There were no injuries. And we got them back in the same day. But we evaluate that as the fire progressed. We knew that our goal after a certain period was to confine it to that complex. We had multiple exposures. We had damage to 3 exposure properties, very minor. Once we knew what we had, confining it was the goal, and we did it.
You said there were explosions heard. Do we have any more information on that?
I'm not going to get into that at this time.
Well, I just want to ask you, when you come to a fire of this magnitude, how do you assess where and how many people you're going to need to evacuate?
Well, there again, it's the movement of the fire. It's how quick we can set up to defend the exposed properties. And when we believe that those properties could be in peril is when we make the move. It's easier and safer to protect in place. And if we can't do that, then we make the decision to evacuate.
Anybody put in perspective overall how many fires, 10 alarm fires with this many responding units, place that in context of the state or the greater Boston area?
This one in Cambridge a few months ago, and there's not many. This is a significant event statewide, a fire of this magnitude.
Is there concern when you have this many units responding that if anything happens in their communities, there are problems?
There again, it's one of those things that we accept. We provide mutual aid quite a bit, and under normal circumstances, you expect it, you accept it. But there again, yes, this did have a ripple effect, and it stripped many communities of their protection because a crime was committed.
We're very fortunate in Massachusetts to have an extensive amount of pre-planning in that regard. The chief has a local mutual aid plan. He participates in a district mutual aid plan, and then we have a statewide mobilization plan for large incidents to provide resources to the chief and his department in that particular incident and to provide backfill. But as mentioned, an incident like this is definitely a drain on the resources around the incident scene, and it does extend much further than the confines of the city of Waltham.
At what point do you actually start gathering any evidence that might be used in an arson investigation? Is that from the get-go somebody's thinking about that?
We're not going to let out investigative details on this incident, but generally speaking, I will say that, and as I mentioned in my comments, we interview first on-scene firefighters. Part of their training is to look at the incident scene and assess what's going on, but also to see the conditions. Those all play into the investigative process. This investigation started very early on the morning of July 23rd and has progressed well since then, to the credit of all these investigators.
How long did it take to get to this point that it is arson?
The investigation, the scene work took over the 6 days. The investigation commenced early on that Sunday morning and progressed throughout the time, 6 days of on-site investigative work, and then the continuous time right up until right now was continuing to develop information and gather information.
I think we have time for one more question, Marshall.
A cadaver dog in a fire or site that's big?
I'm not going to let out any investigative aspects of this investigation.
Have you been able to rule out at least that there was a deceased body?
I'm not going to mention any investigative details about this investigation. All right, thank you very much.